sweet friends. How are you this Wednesday? We are going to read chapter 10, and it's called An Explosion. Remember yesterday when I told you what the chapter was going to be about? We were like, what is going to explode? I don't know. Sit back, grab a juice, grab some cookies and a snack, and just let me read you chapter 10. You just sit back and enjoy. Chapter 10, An Explosion. Day after day, the spider waited, head down, for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur that she would save his life, she was determined to keep her promise. Now remember, Charlotte told Wilbur, I'm going to save you so the Zuckermans don't eat you. So maybe she'll give us a glimpse in this chapter of what she meant. Charlotte was naturally patient, and we all know what patient means. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web. And she felt sure that if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, an idea would come to her mind. Finally, one morning, towards the middle of July, the idea came. Why, how perfectly simple, she said to herself. The way to save Wilbur's life is to play a trick on Zuckerman. If I can fool a bug, thought Charlotte, I can certainly fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs. Wilbur walked into the yard just at that moment. What are you thinking about, Charlotte? He asked. I was thinking, said the spider, that people are very gullible. What does gullible mean? Easy to fool, said Charlotte. That's a mercy, replied Wilbur, and he lay down in the shade of the fence and went fast asleep. The spider, however, stayed awake, gazing into the light, making plans for the future. Summer was half gone. She knew she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery Arabelle wandered into the Zuckerman's front yard, followed by Fern. Avery carried a live frog in her hand. Yuck. Fern had a crown of daisies on her head. The children ran for the kitchen. Just in time for a piece of blueberry pie, said Mrs. Zuckerman. Look at my frog, said Avery, placing her frog in her hand. Take that thing out of here, said Mrs. Zuckerman. He's hot, said Fern. He's almost dead, that frog. He is not, said Avery. He lets me scratch him between the eyes. The frog jumped and landed on Mrs. Zuckerman's dishpan full of soapy water. You're getting your pie on you, said Fern. Can I look for eggs in the hen house, Aunt Edith? Run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens. It's getting all over everything, shouted Fern. His pie was all over his front. Come on, frog, cried out Avery. She scooped up the frog. The frog kicked splashing soapy water into the blueberry pie. Another crisis, groaned Fern. Let's swing on the swing, said Avery. The children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the country. It was a simple long piece of heavy rope tied to the beam over the north doorway. At the bottom end of the rope was a fat knot to sit on it. It was arranged so that you could swing without being pushed. He climbed a ladder onto it. Then, holding the rope, he stood on the edge and looked down, and were scared and dizzy. Then he straddled the knot so that it took act as a seat. Then he got up the nerve, took a deep breath, and jumped. For a second, you seemed to be falling to the barn floor far below, but then suddenly the rope would begin to catch you, and you would sail through the barn door, going a mile a minute, with the wind whistling in your eyes and ears and hair. Then you would zoom upward in the sky and look at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would twist and turn with the rope. How fun! Then you would drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back to the barn almost into half loft, then sail again. And then you would do it again and again and again. Then you would jump off and land on your feet. Mothers for miles were worried about Zuckerman's swing. They feared some child would fall off, but no child ever did. Children almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think. Avery had put the frog in his pocket and climbed into the hayloft. The first time I swung on the swing, I almost crashed into the barn, he yelled. Take that frog out, ordered Fern. Avery straddled the rope and jumped. He sailed out of the door, frog and all, and into the sky, frog and all. Then he sailed back to the barn. Your tongue is purple, screamed Fern. So is yours, cried Avery, sailing out again with the frog. I have hay inside my dress. It itches, called Fern. Scratch it, yelled Avery as he sailed back. It's my turn, said Fern. Jump off. Fern got the itch, sang Avery. Then he jumped off and threw the swing up to his sister. She shut her eyes tight and jumped. She felt the dizzy drop then the supporting lift of the swing. When she opened her eyes, she was looking up into the blue sky and was about to fly back through the door. They took turns for an hour. When the children grew tired of swinging, they went down towards the pasture and picked wild berries and ate them. Their tongues turned from purple to red. Fern bit into a raspberry and had a bad-tasting bug inside it, and she got discouraged. Avery found an empty candy box and put his frog in it. The frog seemed tired after the morning in the swing. The children walked slowly up toward the barn. They, too, were tired and hardly had any energy to walk. Let's build a tree house, suggested Avery. I want to live in a tree with my frog. I'm going to visit Wilbur, Fern announced. They climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily toward the pig pen. Wilbur heard them coming and got up. Avery noticed a spider web, and coming closer, she saw Charlotte. Oh, I'll show you the swing. That is so cool, huh? There is Avery and Fern. Hey, look at that big spider, she says. Look at that big spider, he said. Leave it alone, commanded Fern. You got a frog, isn't that enough? That's a fine spider, and I'm going to capture it, said Avery. He took the cover of the candy box, then he picked up a stick. I'm going to knock that old spider into the box, he said. Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. This might be the end of Charlotte, if he didn't stop the boy. You stop it, Avery, cried Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence of the pig pen. He was just about to raise the stick to hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and tumbled and landed on the edge of Wilbur's trough. The trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was right underneath, and there was a dull explosion as the egg broke and a horrible smell came out. There's your title of the chapter, Explosion. What exploded? You're right, that stinky egg. Fern screamed. Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with horrible gases and smells from the rotten egg. Templeton, who had been resting in his home, scuttled away into the barn. Good night, screamed Avery. Good night. What a stink. Let's get out of here. Fern was crying. She held her nose and ran towards the house. Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see him go. It had been a narrow escape. Later on that morning, the animals came up from the pasture, the sheep, the lambs, the ganders, the goose, and the 7 goslings. There were so many complaints about that awful smell, and Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again, how the Arbo boy almost captured Charlotte, and how the smell of the broken egg drove them away just in time. It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life, said Wilbur. The goose was proud of her to share the adventure. I'm delighted that the egg never hatched, she gabbled. Templeton, of course, was miserable over the loss of his beloved egg, but he wouldn't resist boasting. It pays to save things, he says. A rat never knows when something is going to come in handy. I never throw anything away. Well, said one of the lambs, this whole business is all well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? This smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn with a rotten egg smell? Don't worry, you'll get used to it, said Templeton. He sat up and pulled wisely at his long whiskers, then crept away to pay a visit to the dump. So can you imagine that? He's sitting there all happy and grinning, touching his whiskers like this because nobody likes that smell, but he doesn't care. When Lurvy showed up at lunchtime carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped a few short paces from the pig pen. He sniffed the air and made a face. What is thunder, he said. What in thunder? Setting the pail pen down and picked up the stick and Avery had dropped. Rats. Woo! I might have known a rat that would make a nest under the trot. Oh, I hate rats. And Avery dragged Wilbur's trot across the yard and kicked some dirt into the rat nest, burying the rotten egg and all Tippleton's possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trot, drooling with hunger. Lurvy poured. The slops ran creamily down around the pig's eyes and ears. Wilbur grunted. He gulped and sucked and sucked and gulped all the food. It was a delicious meal. Skim milk, wheat, leftover pancakes, half a donut, some summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, ginger snap, fishtail, orange peel, several noodles from the noodle soup, a scum of cup of cocoa, an ancient jelly roll, and strip of paper from the garbage pail, and a spoonful of raspberry jelly. That's a lot of food. Wilbur ate heartily. He planned to leave half the noodle and a few droppings of milk for Templeton. Then he remembered that rat had been useful in saving Charlotte's life, and that Charlotte was trying to save his life. Now that the broken egg was buried, the air cleared and the barn smelt good again. The afternoon passed and evening came. Shadows lengthened. The cool and kindly breath of evening entered through the doors and windows. Oops. Sorry. Charlotte sat moodily eating a horsefly and thinking about the future. After a while, she was beside herself. She descended to the center of the web where she began to cut some of her lines. She worked slowly but steadily while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was at work. Deep in her soft bed, Wilbur snoozed. Deep in his soft bed, Wilbur snoozed. Over in his favorite corner, the goslings whistled a night song. Charlotte tore quite a section of the web, leaving an open space in the middle. Then she started weaving something to take the place of the thread she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump around midnight, the spider was still at work. Charlotte is one busy lady, isn't she? Wow, that was a smelly explosion, huh? Next chapter tomorrow is called The Miracle. Miracles are good things that happen, and they happen all the time. All right, guys. See you later, and I hope you liked Chapter 10. Bye.